Good afternoon. I'm Chris Scherer, Member Communications Director of the Society of Broadcast Engineers and the co-host of this month's episode of the SBE WEBxtra, the SBE chapter of the web. This is a monthly SBE meeting, usually held on the third Monday of the month. The SBE is the Association for Broadcast and Multimedia Technology Professionals, with about 5,000 members, mostly in the U.S., but also around the world. The SBE WEBxtra is sponsored by Katrine. Katrine, unique experience, individual solutions, reliable performance. The host of today's SBE WEBxtra is SBE board member Kirk Harnack, who is also the chair of the SBE Social Networking Committee. Hello, Kirk.
Hello, Chris. Good to see you and glad to be here and glad that you are here, SBE members, fellow SBE members. This is our chance every month to bring you somebody from the engineering world or from the SBE world that probably couldn't get around to every chapter to talk to us in person. And today is no exception. I'm really glad that our guest today is Wayne Pecena. And you've heard that name a lot. He does a lot of teaching, but he's also been the president of the SBE for the last couple of years. So, Chris, I'm delighted that we're going to be bringing Wayne in. And I always forget, do we bring Wayne in now or do we want to save him for after the member announcements?
Whatever you want to do. You can tease him now or we can hop into the member update, whatever you want to do.
I heard his voice. We got to bring him on camera right now. Wayne Pecena, you're going to be our guest right after the member update. Welcome in. It's good to see you, Wayne.
Well, thank you, Kurt and Chris. It's certainly a pleasure to be with you this afternoon.
Well, Wayne, you certainly have had an interesting term as president with COVID, and we're going to be asking you a lot of questions about that. I know you've got some comments, and I think it's I'm not going to say it's been good, but it's been different, and it's allowed people to connect in different ways. Some of them actually have been good. So we're going to be getting to that and hear Wayne's thoughts about presiding over the SBE for the past couple of years and during COVID. But first, Chris Scherer, you've got a member update for us. Let's hear it.
Yes, I do. Here is your SBE member update for September 20, 2021. As you likely know by now, the 2021 NAB show has been canceled, and with that, the SBE national meeting events planned to be held in Las Vegas are also canceled. And of course, the October issue of the Signal, which will be in your mailbox any day, is full of information about the convention and the SBE national meeting. You can just go ahead and ignore most of that. The SBE Board of Directors will still hold its fall meeting, although it will be virtual once again. That's currently planned for October 11. The SBE will present the Membership Meeting and Awards Program as a virtual event. That is currently scheduled to air on October 18th and will be presented as the October SBE WEBxtra. Watch for details on that as the date approaches. There's one more live webinars by SBE presentation this month on September 23rd. John Myatt of Imagine Communications presents SMPTE ST2110 Basics. On October 21st, the SIP series continues with Module 2, Service and Troubleshooting Techniques for Voice over IP. Sean Dolan of InRush Broadcast Services and Kristen Roberts of IQ Wired are the presenters. And on October 28th, we present Virtualized Environment. Roz Clark of Cox Media Group and Jason Ornelas of Bonneville International Corporation will present. For information on these and all the webinars by SBE, go to sbe.org/webinars. The next SBE certification exam window at local chapters is in November. The application date for that exam session has passed, so applications to take an exam in the February window are due at the national office by January 3rd. That seems a long way off, but don't put it off. Also remember, if a local chapter exam is not convenient for you or just not possible because of an in-person restriction, private proctoring is available. The new SBE Specialist Certification, ATSC3, is available, and if you're working with ATSC 3.0, then be sure to add the ATSC3 Specialist letters to your professional title. More information on SBE certification is online, sbe.org/certification. And is your chapter meeting virtually? You should still report those meetings to the national office just as you would an in-person meeting. These meetings count towards the minimum 5 meetings held during a calendar year necessary to qualify for an annual chapter rebate. If you hold your meetings via Zoom, there is a way for the meeting host to export all the attendee information, which simplifies the chapter secretary's task. Chapter leaders, there's a link to the instructions on the SBE website under Chapter Administration. Go to sbe.org/chapter-admin. And I'm hearing from chapters that many are beginning to meet again in person. So be sure to share your chapter meeting photos on the SBE Chapters Facebook group when you do. And that's your SBE member update for September 20, 2021.
Chris, thank you for that update. I always look forward to it. And by the way, something, since the show is recorded, and many of you do watch it recorded from YouTube or from Facebook, if you miss something in the member update, just go back up a little bit and look for Chris's face and listen to that member update over again, because there are good things to hear in there. And if you missed a little something, you can just go right back and hear it. Plus, you notice the links right under Chris in the lower third, and you can go to that link and see what he's talking about that way. So thanks again, Chris Shearer. So Chris, by your suggestion, we're having as our guest today the president of the SBE, the elected president. That means he was elected by us, by his peers in the SBE. And that's always a real good honor and the right way to do things. And that's Wayne Pecena. And Wayne, for the second time in the last few minutes, welcome in. It's good to see you.
Well, thank you again for having me this afternoon.
So Wayne, I got to tell you, one of my memories from right about 2 years ago was in Madison, Wisconsin. Now, Madison just had their meeting in person at the Broadcasters Clinic, their gathering of radio and television engineers. And 2 years ago, in 2019, the SBE National Meeting and the Madison Broadcasters Clinic were held together. The SBE National Meeting, we try to do that with some other convocation, some other conference, so we can take advantage of people already being there. It reduces expenses and gets just as many things done. And I remember walking down a hallway and seeing you looking at your speech that you're going to give that night, and you were making some marks in there, and I could tell you were thinking, is this the best way to say this or not? And I must say, I was really impressed. I wish I had a camera, like the presidential photographer, right? Catches the president of the United States in some nice moments where he looks very pensive. I wish I could have taken your picture then. It'd be hanging on your wall. You would have liked it.
Yes, I remember that moment when you caught me in my little quiet hiding place.
And we didn't know anything at that moment about what was going to befall not only engineers in the radio and television industry, but not only the whole country, but the whole world in the COVID-19 pandemic that has really changed everything. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about what 2 years ago, when you spoke to the Broadcasters Clinic and the gathered SBE membership, what was your vision then? And then, of course, I'm going to follow up with a question: how did that change with COVID? So, what did you have planned for changes or improvements during your presidency?
Well, I think certainly at that point in time, there was a lot of optimism of the future and what it would bring. I came into the role, I think, at an excellent time, because there were several programs that were in the works under Jim Leifer's tenure. The Member Plus, of course, being one of those, and the WEBxtra, this webcast today, really were ramped up and sort of, I want to say, handled or handed to me in my lap. So my challenge was to be sure that those continued and were successful. Uh, with that, we had, of course, completed our strategic plan, and we were well underway with implementing some of the findings. And of course, WEBxtra was one of those findings from our strategic plan that was implemented. So there was a lot of, I think, hope and at least a positive outlook on things that we would ramp up those plans in really some implementable steps and so forth. But of course, as we all know, that things change. I look back and actually in early January, January the 2nd to be exact, when the phone rang and it was John Perret. And in that phone call, he announced that he was going to retire at the end of the year. Of course, that was not a surprise in one way because that discussion had been at least held, in the executive committee meeting and even board members that, one day he was going to retire. But the reality set in that morning where I said, well, this is going to be a different year. And then, of course, by about March or so, the SBE issued our recommendation that chapters suspend face-to-face meetings in lieu of going virtual. And of course, by then NAB had been canceled, and then the domino effect sort of took over in terms of the changing the way that not just SBE, but all organizations did their business, so to speak.
Indeed, and boy, you went through a whole lot of things there, and they're all true. If you think back on when we had to make the change to virtual meetings, and of course engineers, both in radio and television, had to ramp up immediately. It seems like their jobs changed, not necessarily the most, but they sure changed a lot. They got real busy with corporations saying, hey, you can't come in the building, or limited staff, very limited,
Right.
2 people in the building, 3 people, 1 person at the same time. And we talked to both radio and television engineers who then had to make, what was working in studios, radio and television studios in a single building, they had to come up with some way to produce similar content from now lots of different places, typically around town and in people's homes. Tell me what you saw or what you heard or anything remarkable about what engineers were tasked with at the beginning of COVID now a year and a half ago.
Well, I think you're certainly right that many stations all of a sudden needed to implement remote production facilities. Not only just remote facilities, but also being able to maybe operate their station remotely. Some stations, I think, maybe were better prepared for that than others, but there was a tremendous demand to implement technology. Further, I think challenged by simply the supply of the resources that you needed. And you think about that resource list can get fairly long. Yes, I can go maybe get some type of audio codec, but then maybe I need a better broadband connection at that remote site. A lot of those remote sites were individuals' homes. Again, maybe not a problem. Maybe that adequate broadband internet service was there, but also maybe it wasn't. So I think there was just numerous challenges that were just all of a sudden put in the engineering staff's lap, whether that was let's say a staff of multiple individuals, or in many cases, particularly some of the smaller facilities, that's one individual that also may have responsibility for numerous stations.
Wayne, thinking about what engineers were tasked with, and I've spoke with a bunch of engineers early on. It's part of it with my job at TELUS Alliance, and part of it doing This Week in Radio Tech, and part of it with SBE. So I felt like I got a really good handle on what different things that different engineers had to do. Now, by the way, I'm approaching Wayne to ask you. I'm foreshadowing, asking you about your own job as an educator and how that changed during COVID, because you performed some really important things, getting college level students, into the broadcast or IT worlds. But so TV engineers found out things like they had to decide, for example, a video editor. Could that video editor work from home? And if so, did they need an upgraded broadband connection? And did they need their super duper computers for video editing at home? Or did they find out that, you know what, if we just remote desktop into our computers at the TV station, that actually works better than trying to outfit us at home with super editing computers there. And a lot of things like that were discovered in the early days of having to work remotely. And I think it was a learning and iterative process over several weeks or even months, where we found out the best ways, or at least the best ways for certain broadcast facilities to carry out their jobs. And that's a given. A lot of people have been through that, and we kind of know how to do that now. I think different manufacturers are coming up with new and better tools to help make that happen, and maybe even in different paradigms, some cloud-based, some data center-based, maybe just better access to your tools at the TV or radio station. But I want to ask you about you as an educator. How did your life and your world and your work change with COVID coming on in the spring of 2020?
Well, certainly our university followed suit with many that the educational process continued, but it virtually overnight went to a virtual environment. In our case, primarily based on Zoom. And when we hit the March spring break time, basically the university took about a 2-week spring break instead of the usual week for students. And in that 2 week, sort of revamped to conduct classes virtually, and suspended all in-person events. From our standpoint in the broadcast environment, we are a small PBS and NPR station within a very, very large university. And in our case, we were pretty much, I don't want to say prepared for things, but we were already very, very automated. Because of our small staff, we have relied on that remote access, particularly from key individuals' homes and so forth. So from that standpoint, I think we fared pretty well. What we did lose, however, was some, because we are particularly an NPR station, we do have a lot of programming, particularly music programming, that comes from a volunteer production staff of people in the community. Now that, honestly, we took kind of a little bit of a step back there. Fortunately, we have a lot of stuff archived, so we filled our program schedule okay. And then we slowly revamped with, again, production equipment in people's homes. Some already had the capability that all of a sudden we never see some of those individuals now in the studio anymore. It's a file that is FTP'd. So it, in a lot of ways, changed our workflow of the volunteer staff as well.
I think one phrase that I've come across a couple of times in this year and a half of COVID is MVS, and in my world that means minimum viable studio.
Yes, yes, and of course, there I guess are some bright side. We use this time to do some pretty major renovations of our studio infrastructure, which there's nothing going on. So what better time to do some of those renovations? Now, at the same time, we still were doing some production work, but that generally was centered around a weekly local program that usually featured the university chancellor and or the president. And it was kind of the weekly COVID updates focused upon the community and the university system.
One thing I noticed about SBE meetings is that in our own chapter, I belong to the chapter in Nashville, Tennessee, chapter 103. And, it almost seemed like for the first few months of COVID and having virtual meetings, we actually had higher attendance than the in-person meetings. The novelty of it, you didn't have to drive into the Piccadilly cafeteria. You didn't have to spend any money. You could eat your own peanut butter and jelly sandwich if you wanted to. What did you hear from other chapter chairs around the country as they started their Zoom virtual meetings?
Well, I've heard some very similar stories that particularly chapters in some cases did see a increase in participation, and particularly I want to say some of the larger areas particularly saw that increase to where, I'll use the example of Houston is about 100 miles from us, and you hear the stories about the challenges of getting to that lunch SBE meeting, that it may take you an hour drive to get there, an
Mm.
hour back home, and an hour for the meeting. All of a sudden, now there's 3 hours gone of the day, and that on a lot of days wasn't necessarily practical to do. At the same time, uh, I know personally, I've had the, I guess, honor and the ability to attend a lot of chapter meetings around the country because of Zoom. So, in one way, I think that has been positive. Of course, a key part of that in-person SBE chapter meeting is that fellowship and that individual networking that has been lost. So I think everyone has probably, over time, developed this love-hate relationship with Zoom. But in a lot of, again, it's really provided an opportunity to engage more people in some cases, simply because now the convenience of attending that meeting.
One of the things that we found in the Nashville chapter is, um, I think a couple months in a row, we weren't really finding, and it was up to me to do it, and I wasn't doing a great job of finding a new speaker to speak to us. Seems like we'd gone through all the usual suspects and a few of the non-usual suspects. So we ended up partnering with the chapter in Knoxville, Tennessee. And that chapter's program chair is a fellow who is a PhD doctor at a university. And he has a little bit different perspective on finding people to speak to us to teach us something new than I would have. So we ended up having some pretty interesting meetings in association with the Knoxville chapter. And of course, the attendance went up, and we got to know some of the engineers in Knoxville that we didn't necessarily know before. So that's worked out pretty well for us in Nashville. We do probably half of our meetings now in association with the Knoxville chapter.
Mm-hmm.
What have you found about chapter meetings? Are people combining? And it does seem like I spoke to a couple of combined chapter meetings in the past year and a half with COVID. What do you find?
Yes, I think you're right on. That was, I think, a pretty common practice where those chapters were within the same state or maybe grouped regionally, so to speak. If you think back, kind of the past approach, at least in Texas, you would have particularly a vendor that is making presentations to chapter. Kind of the joke was they would be on the SBE chapter circuit, and they'd hit, City A on Monday, uh, Tuesday was City B, and so forth and so on to fill out the week. So that plan
Mm-hmm.
kind of got collapsed now. Okay, I'll do a virtual presentation, but it'll combine several chapters. Again, maybe that's within the state, or maybe that's regionally, to kind of maximize, the reach of everything.
Something that I was wondering about, when people have to come together to solve a problem, and believe me, last in March of 2020, we had a problem to solve. March and April, and engineers were, as we mentioned earlier, were really tagged. Hey, we got to have people anchoring the news from home, doing TV weather with a green screen from home, doing the morning show with. And how many people can we get on the morning show? Just one, or can we get Tom and Betsy and Lou all back together on the morning show? And and so engineers were really called upon to get this done. Is there any indication that maybe management appreciation for engineers increased, or there became some additional appreciation for engineers during that time, and maybe even continuing on? Can we improve our stature, our standing among broadcast facilities and owners and management?
Well, I would certainly want to think that that did occur, because, again, in many cases, those engineering staff and that technical operations staff, those were the individuals that in many cases were still in the buildings. Now, granted, cut back on the presence and everything, but those are that behind the scenes is really what kept things running. So I would want to think and hope that there was certainly some recognition. I know that was achieved by those that did. I don't want to say suffer, but those that did keep the train running, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you're exiting as SBE president. What's the date of that exit? Is that in October?
That will be in October. In the SBE news that Chris just read through, our tentative plan is on October the 18th to have our annual membership meeting as the October WEBxtra, and during that meeting is where we have the transition ceremony, I guess that you might call it.
Now, has Andrea Cummis, who is the president-elect, has Andrea yet accused you of pushing the date out so you could have a few days longer as SBE president?
No, that hasn't happened yet. So
Okay.
we're going to work. Normally that would have been scheduled. Gosh, for what was it, Monday night
The
during
10th, I think,
NAB?
October 10th, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah,
11th.
whatever
Yeah, the
Monday
Monday,
night.
11th. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, I guess I'm gonna squeeze a few more days out of
You
things.
get another weekend, another unpaid week as SBE president, right?
That's right. That's right. As long as I don't shut my expense account off, I'll be okay.
Well, there you go. Andrea, I'm sorry I had to use a week's worth of your expense account, with all the everything we're doing. I had planned to blow it. Go ahead.
Oh, I just say it was going to really be a big week too.
So just you can say, Andrea, I planned to blow it in Las Vegas, but I didn't get a chance to, so I had to blow it all on some deep sea fishing off the coast of Texas. I'd like to see what Chris has to ask, and then we'd like to end up hearing your advice for Andrea and where you'd like to see things go. I know you had plans to implement some things. You improved a number of programs, as you mentioned, with Jim Leifer started, and saw them through and kept them going. And we had the changing of the executive director to now Jim Ragsdale. But Chris, do you have a question or two you'd like to pass by Wayne?
Well, as someone who is a past president, so Wayne will soon join that elite club here in another month or so. I know when my terms ended, when you first start, I mean, there are plenty of things I know you probably had in your mind that you wanted to accomplish these, whatever, 15, 17, 20 items, whatever your list was. And now that your term is down to its roughly last month here, are there any things that you had on your list that may not have been public, but you kind of regret maybe you didn't get a chance to get to, or you're setting up that you can put in the queue for Andy to take on perhaps when she's sworn in as president?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think particularly one of the areas that I guess I'm disappointed in that I was not able to execute had to do with some of our strategic plan tasks, particularly with expanding the reach and the outreach of SBE. And of course, that plan had SBE to get what I'll call more actively involved in our outreach, both to the broadcast community, but as well to kind of peer organizations. Think about that byline of multimedia professionals, is to try to pursue that to help increase our membership. And of course, with that outreach plan was based upon engagement in other people's conferences and activities. And of course, with all of that going away, that sort of became moot. But, it's not all doom and gloom. There was a lot that not I accomplished, but the society accomplished, either through the leadership from our various committees to the actual SBE staff. to put together a number of new programs. And of course, we began 2020 and launched the technical professional training program, which we've been underway with a little over a year and has been quite successful, particularly successful with many of the state broadcast associations supporting that program financially for their membership. And with that also, of course, you mentioned the ATSC3 certification has been launched. So again, there's been a lot of very positive activities that's went on. One of the advice I was given as I was soon to become the president was to have patience. Well, sometimes that's difficult to do. There are several things that I would have liked to have got accomplished or seen, and I think some upgrades of some of our technology probably comes to mind at first. But I think the most more important thing is to look ahead, and the SBE will change, needs to change as our industry change, and we simply have to be prepared and implement that change in the right direction.
And my question wasn't meant to shine a bad light on you or anyone in any way. It was just a chance to maybe reflect on some ideas that, just because of a variety of situations, not the least being a global pandemic, kind of interfered with the overall plan of things and caused a switching of the gears, if you will. So I do have one other question for you. I was thinking back to when I started getting involved on the national level. Your path into the president's chair was kind of accelerated compared to a lot of people, thanks to just some other changes and other people in the lineup having changes in their own career paths or their job status, etc. Are there any past, whether it's presidents, board members, directors, whomever, that you kind of look up to as sort of helping you get involved in the SBE and pursuing activities on the national level where you are now?
Well, I look back, certainly I had no career plans as I want to pursue leadership positions in SBE. That was never necessarily on my roadmap. Back in, I guess it was about 2011, probably 2012, I was encouraged to run for the board by Kimberly Kiesel, who at the time was the education director. And, I thought she was sort of crazy. Nobody's going to elect me onto the board, but, I wanted to be polite and everything and said, sure, I'll do that. And by golly, I got elected. And that's kind of,
Great. Now what have I done?
yeah, it's like, oh, what do we do now? And of course, at that time, Ralph Hogan was the current president. So I think if you look at all the successive presidents, they've all been very, I think, very supportive of me. They've all been a role model to follow. And as you mentioned, yes, there's been, I think, my pathway has been accelerated, because at least twice along the way, I was appointed to a position due to a sudden vacancy that occurred. And as a result, I think my, that normal, what I'll call stepping stone path to that higher position was accelerated, including my tenure as a vice president, which I think lasted, maybe 6 months at best.
Well, I'm sure everyone would agree that we were all surprised when Wayne was elected. So, hey, Wayne, I've got one more question for you, and it's been great to follow you through your progression through your roles at SBE, and you started out, of course, as a member, as I am, and now that you've seen the organization from so many different angles, I'm curious to know, those of us who are members, and yes, I was fortunate enough to be elected to the board of directors, but I'll put it this way, Wayne, you get to go to the secret meetings, the meetings that even the board doesn't get to go to. And I say that, mostly in jest, but from your different angles of being involved with SBE now and seeing how SBE can assist with engineers and its members' career growth. Now that you've seen it from so many different angles, what advice do you have to people like me and people like those who are watching this show? What would you encourage us to take advantage of? What would you encourage us to spend our time and our focus on with regard to SBE, but as it relates to our own careers, increasing our stature, our knowledge, our income? Because that's always something that we'd like to increase and so forth, become more valuable to our employers and our clients. So you've seen it from all angles. What would you encourage us to do?
Well, I would encourage everyone to simply let the leadership of SBE know what is on your mind and know what is important to you. In terms of, I think of the kind of pillar services that SBE provides, certainly as our certification program, our professional development or continuing education, and our frequency coordination programs. But within those, particularly with the education programs, we need your feedback. We need your suggestions of what are the right programs to offer in which to enhance and help you in our career. Because really, our goal as a professional society is to enhance our members' career. Our annual salary survey continues to show that those holding SBE certifications do receive higher salaries in the industry. And I think that overall, again, continuing learning as our technology changes and that engagement, that personal interest in the industry is important. But for us as the leadership to do that, we really need that feedback of certainly, we all enjoy a pat on the back, but more importantly, what are we not doing that you need? Or what are the right education programs that you need to help benefit you?
Gotcha. Chris, I think you had a follow-up question as well.
Well, yeah, actually, you kind of led into it perfectly for me, Wayne. You hold, I don't know if you hold the record, but you certainly have a lot under your belt for teaching webinars by SBE courses. I don't have a current count. Maybe you have a number that you've assembled and provided to our membership already. It's funny though, you just solicited from the viewers and the membership for ideas of future educational offerings. I was going to ask you, with so many webinars already under your belt as the teacher, any ideas you have for the future as to some topics that you've considered putting together for presentation in webinars by SBE or Ennis workshops or somewhere else?
Mm-hmm. Well, I do have, I'll call it my little notebook list of things. And I'll be honest, those are not original ideas from me. Those are suggestions that have come from members that have contacted me with either a suggestion or asking about. I don't know if it's premature to announce anything at this point. I just finished up back in August a fairly lengthy webinar series, the 2021 IP networking series. So it was like, gosh, when the end of August rolled around and that last one was finished, there was sort of this sigh of relief. So I thought, well, maybe we'll take a kind of a breather for a couple of months here and see where we go. But I think there's always an opportunity for more. It's interesting that I'm finding suggestions for what I'll call back to some very basic fundamentals, which most of my focus has been on maybe more advanced things. At the same time, there's suggestions that is looking for those more advanced. So I think there's some opportunities here to kind of reassess where some of those might be.
Good deal.
Very good.
Chris, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just going to say that I like the back to basics routine. I think it's always worthwhile to look at where we've been, or the fact, I mean, just like the TPT, the Technical Professional Training Program, our mentor program, we do have members who are newer to the industry or just thinking of getting involved, who don't necessarily need right off the bat the high level, in-depth courses that I think a lot of times we think, oh, we've got to get into part 97 of this topic type thing. And sometimes we forget we need to go back and even talk about soldering, basic electronics, even some introductory management type stuff. So
that is often a conundrum. Sometimes I think, well, it must be boring to teach somebody about balanced audio lines in the analog world and signal to noise ratios and things like that. And yet, I haven't had anybody tell me that they were bored if I'm talking to them about these things, and they're, because you got to have those fundamentals so you can then move on to things in the digital and the packet realm. And that's one of the things that I've enjoyed about Wayne's teaching in the IT world, is he really starts with basics and gets us all on the same page, so that when he does move into more complex things, there we are, our brains are all in the same place, and nobody's really thinking outside the box or wrong-headedly about the concept that Wayne's talking about, because he got us all together on the same, we're all on the same bus moving forward, and Wayne's driving and showing us the sights.
Excellent. Kind of a good analogy, although Wayne driving the bus, that kind of scares me a little bit.
That's sort of scary. Yeah. Reminds me of driving a rent car in the Boston area,
Oh, gosh. Oh, bad. Even with a GPS, that's pretty dangerous. Wayne, I want to thank you for being our guest today and wrapping up your term as president of SBE. Congratulations, and many times over, for being elected by your peers to lead our organization and to help set our direction, and to when you set an example for us, especially in the realm, I think, of teaching and education and camaraderie. And even though we couldn't have much camaraderie in the last 2 years, it's good to have you as the head of this organization. So thank you very much. And do you have any last minute advice for Andy Cummis, your successor?
Well, I would like to close with just a sincere thank you to everyone for your support, not only during my 2 years as president, but my entire leadership time at SBE. It certainly has been an honor to serve. Going forward, I think probably the best advice I can offer, Andrea, is some of that same advice that was offered to me, and particularly the one comment that I think most frequently stuck in my head was the one from Jim Lifer about have patience, because there is a lot to be done. Some of the challenges, of course, is making that prioritization and not let too many things on your plate distract from kind of those core services that we provide. Again, frequency coordination, continuing education, and those certification programs. And then finally, I think is listen to the membership, and to the membership, please let us know what's on your mind.
Chris, with all the meetings I've been to that involved someone being there as the immediate past president, I don't think we've seen the last of Wayne, have we?
No, I don't think so. He's a bad penny. He just won't go away. But that's okay.
Wayne, thanks so much
him around.
Wayne, thanks for being with us. We look forward to you continuing to teach us in the future in your terrific webinars. And that's it for me. Chris, anything you'd like to wrap up with? And it's all yours.
That's it. I think we can call this edition of the SBE WEBxtra a wrap. This is the SBE chapter of the web. We present it monthly. We hope you'll join us each time. We will post the replay on our YouTube channel, usually within a day or so. The SBE WEBxtra is sponsored by Katrine, whom we thank for the support. Katrine, unique experience, individual solutions, reliable performance. If you hold SBE certification, viewing the SBE WEBxtra qualifies you for 1/2 point in category G, that's attendance. It's just like attending a local chapter meeting. And that does it for this installment of the SBE WEBxtra from the Society of Broadcast Engineers, the Association for Broadcast and Multimedia Technology Professionals. Once again, thanks to our guests, SBE President Wayne Pecena. And on behalf of Kirk Harnack, we'll see you next month.